Hello, gold and silver coin TV viewers. How have you been? I'm Professor Lee, who loves you. Today, I'm going to think about the various meanings of two languages. One that we can misjudge and the other that we can use as fresh. Doesn't it feel very different just by hearing these two words? Thick and fresh? They both have plausible, fascinating meanings. But the images and atmospheres we feel on a daily basis are completely different. Today, I'm going to analyze the difference between thick and fresh. From a psychological perspective, why do people react differently to these words? And what kind of psychology is lurking? It's a more interesting story than I thought. First of all, the phrase, suck, usually gives a slightly elaborate, but slightly calculated impression. It gives you a tactful, subtle image that hides something intentionally and gives it a subtle hint. Especially when the suck is read among people. The other person tends to unwittingly become a little wary. From a psychological perspective, it has to do with people's instinct to read the intentions around them and their tendency to avoid danger. Suck gives a signal that there is a hidden intention, and it acts both attractively and threateningly from person to person. On the other hand, doesn't the word refreshing come to mind as fresh and fresh images? Just by listening to it? Psychologically speaking, refreshing is linked to positive energy. It naturally attracts people's hearts with new stimuli, positive first impressions, and a lively atmosphere. Refreshing images make people feel transparency and authenticity, which makes it easier for people to trust. So when you describe someone as refreshing, it is taken to mean that the person has a transparent and natural charm. Let's summarize 5 things to make the difference between these two easier. First, there is a hidden intention. But freshness is based on transparency and honesty. Second, a smart attitude is strategic. But a refreshing attitude simply appeals to the other person's mind instinctively. Third, it slightly stimulates vigilance in slyness, but gives friendliness and stability in refreshing. Fourth, although the sly is quite calculating, the freshness shows charm in authenticity and naturalness. Lastly, the sly creates a strange tension, and the refreshing brings fresh and light energy. In conclusion, sly and fresh are all words that describe the fascination between people, but their feelings and psychological reactions are completely different. The sly charm can spark mystery and interest, or the refreshing feeling can give a fresh and friendly impression. I can't say which one is more appealing, but the important thing is when, where, and which one works better. They both have their own charms. There are times when fresh-looking people can engage in hidden abnormalities. Therefore, rather than simply judging the difference between a fresh person and a fresh person by their outward appearance, we need to ponder the hidden psychological elements of them. Everyone has many different aspects, and what they appear to be can vary, depending on the situation or relationship. The person who looks fresh can sometimes do something unexpectedly calculating, or the person who has had a slight hint of sophistication can reveal his or her most honest story. It seems that these things eventually make relationships more interesting and multi-layered. The important thing is that, in some situations, we are free to transition between sophistication and freshness. If you use these two charms in the right place, you will have a more positive impact not only on the other person but also on yourself. So why not try not to be too biased? And broaden your perspective on people by acknowledging different aspects and psychology? A person who acts like something very pure can hide his or her deep heart. In this respect, snotty and refreshing may seem completely opposite to each other. But they may actually be a paper difference. Even the same behavior can be seen as snotty or refreshing, depending on the intent or context. For example, in some situations, a person's bright and proactive conversation may seem refreshing and engaging. But in other situations, it may seem like an out-of-the-box intention or calculation and be read as snotty. This eventually depends on how the other person interprets the person's behavior and mood, and what kind of trust or relationship context is underlying them. So the important thing is to understand how they are used, and in what context they work, rather than simply concluding that snotty is bad and refreshing is good. If we look at people from a more delicate and flexible perspective, we will be able to empathize and understand the various aspects of the other person. Most of all, remember that we ourselves can express ourselves in many ways. After all, snotty and refreshing are just a part of our charm in and of itself. Rather than using them as a yardstick to judge someone's overall appearance or essence, we should take them as a clue to understand people. Snotty can show one's initiative and strategic aspects, and refreshing can represent purity and authenticity. However, it is important to recognize that their boundaries can be blurred as needed, and interpreted differently depending on the situation. After all, attractiveness is not cross-sectional, and it is the result of the fusion of various aspects of a person. So why don't you look at both snotty and refreshing with an open mind and find your own colors within them? If you understand and make good use of these two charms, you will be able to create richer and more colorful relationships. How can we find out the truth easily? In order to find out the truth, it is necessary to try to grasp the intentions and context behind the other person's words and actions, rather than simply judging them by their appearance or actions. The most important thing is to try to understand the other person deeper through conversation. Ask questions and see how the person reacts. People who are sincere are consistent and natural in their words and actions. But otherwise, somewhere unnatural or contradictory can be revealed. It is also important to examine your preconceptions before judging the other person psychologically. This is because we can unconsciously judge the other person based on a certain image. So the best way is to slowly observe the other person's various aspects and get to know the real things that are revealed in the relationship. Little by little over time. Relationships are the process of building trust by taking time to confirm them over time, rather than drawing immediate conclusions. There are people who are really good at hiding their identity. When will that identity be revealed? When people who are really good at hiding their identity reveal themselves, they are often shown in unexpectedly small acts of thoughtlessness. And in certain situations, when a person is faced with a certain crisis or is asked an unexpected question, his or her real intentions and feelings are often expressed. Also, if you continue a long-term relationship, the makeup will one day crack. What's not lasting is, after all, not who he or she really is. What's important is to look at the relationship in an attempt to understand even its hidden side, rather than in an attempt to cut yourself too much. Because even though you can hide it completely, at some point, One's true feelings will eventually be revealed. What can capture it is the building of trust, through constant observation and time. After all, it's important to understand that slickness and freshness are all parts of one's colorful charm. Not everyone can be defined as a simple image, and there are complex and diverse hidden aspects to it. Just as a person who looks sly can sometimes be honest, and a person who is refreshing can have an unexpected calculating side. We all live our lives by choosing the appearance and attitude we need in certain situations. What's important is the attitude of trying to understand the whole nature of a person that all those aspects create, whether it's chic or refreshing. These traits are just one element that makes each person attractive, and should not be the criteria for judging or defining a person. I think we can create richer and more honest relationships when we look positively at each person's attractiveness while respecting diversity as they are rather than defining people. People are constantly changing, and true charm shines through in them. We need to observe whether there is any truth to it rather than a plausible word or action, right? Yes. After all, what matters is not the words or actions that appear on the surface, but the authenticity that lies within them. Everyone can show different sides of each other in a variety of situations, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. What matters is the sincerity in them. Therefore, it is better not to judge immediately because you feel fresh, and not to trust them unconditionally because you feel fresh. It would be more meaningful to constantly examine the other person's words and actions, and to feel the consistent appearance or sincerity that is revealed by building up with that person. In fact, the word fresh or hungry may not be the essence of the person, but rather an image that we interpret in situations and contexts. So why don't you be a little more relaxed and look at people multi-layered and have an attitude of accepting their various charms? When you look at it that way, you will see that feng and fresh are simply two colors of charm in themselves, not the criteria for defining a person as a whole. Thank you for watching so far. Subscriptions and likes are a huge boost to video production.